In the previous video, you have seen how to write tests with manual fakes and stubs. In this video, we will start to write the same test using mocking frameworks. That is using the framework of mock to write the test cases.
Folks, CodeTutor here, and my name is Anil Deshpande.
Welcome to new video on testing in Android. And in the previous video, we had said that our focus from now when it comes to unit testing will be all about interaction and behavior tests, and mocking frameworks will be used for that. Well, instead of trying to learn the mocking frameworks on something like view model, which is relatively a new thing for us as far as testing is concerned, we will try to apply it on something that we are already familiar with, that is repository or data access object. And in that direction, we will use repository as an element of our discussion for example purpose. So this is how our repository looks like. You are already familiar with it. We have gone through this in the previous videos. Let me just quickly go through what we have done. It's a test that has setup, and in the setup we have fake country DAO and stub country service. And then the country repository basically uses these fake DAO and service for testing purpose. And if you observe in the tests that are written down in the line number 25 or 31, we are just assuming that the data is coming from an API and asserting based on that behavior. And in the next one, we are just assuming here that the data is coming from a DAO and asserting based on the behavior. We are testing the final behavioral outcome and asserting based on that. But if you look at it, have we tested the interaction of the service with the DAO when it was fetching the data? Did we try to test how many times the DAO method was called internally while it was trying to fetch the data? What I'm trying to basically say is, in both of the test cases, what we have really tested is the behavior. But we were not able to really test the internal interaction that is happening. And here we were basically just talking about the repository which talks with the DAOs and services. When we look at the interaction between the view model and the repository, of course you have to test the behavior, but what also becomes very critical is also testing interaction. So with the limited manual mocks and stubs that we have written, there are quite a number of limitations associated with it. You can't check if a method was called. And let's assume that a new member adds a new method. Now you have to write one for every interface that gets implemented. And not only that, you have to keep updating them, and which becomes a pain when the interfaces keep changing. And because you will be using flows and coroutines, it becomes hard to fake suspend functions or flows using the manual stubs and fakes. And you can't test what was passed as an argument very easily, because with the manual test it becomes really complicated. You want to throw an exception, you have got to code that also yourself. And while doing this, you will end up reusing the logic, and manually that means copy pasting all over the place, and it can create a lot of mess. And that is going to slow you down as the number of test cases grow, because when you build real world applications, the amount of code that you might actually end up writing quickly grows without you realizing it. And if you want to write all this manually, then it becomes really a big mess. That is the reason why instead of doing manual testing in Android, you would need something better. That is, you have to have some kind of a mocking frameworks for testing in Android. So let's have a look at the popular mocking frameworks. You have Mock, Mockito, and KMock. Mock is mainly used with Kotlin and Android apps. Mockito is used if Java heavy project is there for the Android application. It is even used with Java application, but if you are using Java as the programming language for developing Android application, then Mockito is quite often used. And Mockito also supports Kotlin. And KMock is mainly used in Kotlin multi-platform, that is KMP. In our case, our application is pure Kotlin application. We would be good to use mock framework, and that is what we would be using to write our mock framework based unit test cases. The first thing that you will have to do when you want to use mock as a mocking framework is add dependencies to the build Gradle file. This is how it looks. You add mock and mock Android. The mock is used for writing unit test cases, and mock Android if at all you are writing instrumented tests. When you use this framework, you will come across the statements annotation mock, every, verify, coVerify. These are not the only statements that you will come across. There are quite a lot of more, but this is what a typical syntax of mock framework based statements look like. It looks familiar, lambda function, but it also looks slightly different. What you are basically looking at is Kotlin DSL. DSL stands for domain specific language. What is Kotlin DSL? Think of it like you are creating your own mini version of Kotlin that is easier to read and write for a specific task. And in this case, the specific task is testing. And if you are wondering how is it possible, well, it is possible because of certain capabilities that are built into the Kotlin programming language. Things like extension functions, lambda with receivers, infix functions, and type safe builders. I have dedicated Kotlin fundamentals tutorial series where I do talk about some of these things in a couple of videos. So let's continue. For example, how does a DSL statement would look like? Let's take an example of coVerify. How do I exactly read it to make sense of it? What I am really saying is verify that country_DAO_getAll method was called exactly once during this test. So I am testing the interaction, not just the final behavior. And mock framework makes this possible. And coVerify is nothing but a kind of a assertion. Just that now this is backed up with mock framework. So let's get started by writing the code. This is our code base. We are already familiar with this. And let me check the Gradle script to check whether we have added the necessary dependencies. Yeah, the Gradle dependencies have been added. Now what we will do is we will rewrite an existing test case that we had written earlier using mock framework. So let me open the test folder here. Under the repository, we have this country repository test. This we had written using the manual stubs and fakes. We will rewrite this using mock framework. So let me create a new Kotlin class. Let me call it as country repository test with mock. And in this, I will have to create instance of country DAO and country service. But then I will annotate it with mock. Now, what this basically means is these will be mocked instances. This is how mock framework helps you to annotate the object that you want to mock. And then I will have to create an instance of the object that is under test, that is the country repository that I want to test. And then I will have to create the test data. So let me create some countries and list of countries. So these are just the test data. Now, as is the case, I will have to write before function setup, and in this the first line that I will be writing is initializing of the mocks. The mocks are the country DAO and country service. How do I do that? I will write mock annotations dot init pass this, and once that is done, I will have to initialize the repository with mocks. So country repository with country DAO and country service. Now the setup is done, and now after that I will have to write teardown. So after function teardown clear all mocks. So it will basically clear all the mocks that would have been initialized in the setup method. So whatever the basic minimum thing that we had to do to set up the test cases using the mocking framework, it is done. Now it is time to write the test cases, and that we shall do in the next video. Brings us to the end of this particular video. Don't forget to like, comment, share the video and subscribe to the channel. Take care. Bye.